Alright, I know it's late here, probably for most people, except the Australians, but I thought I would see how many people are live right now, and do a few question and answers. Since usually I do the question and answers in the private Facebook group, I was going to start making a few public on the public page. Make a campaign to push bro splits and fight against. Alright, so I didn't really prepare any topics. So I have a microphone, I'll hook that up another time, depending on how quiet it is. Alright, so how many users we have? 12 users. Alright, so you can start some questions if anybody has any specific questions. Any topic really. How to use Levemir insulin for a cut, what main benefits? Levemir, I mean, are you asking because that's all you have is Levemir, or if there's any benefits to Levemir specifically for a cut? Frank, yeah, any kind of questions. Levemir, I'd say the only benefit for a cut over other insulins, if that's specifically what you're asking, is that Levemir was shown to reduce appetite, versus Leanness and other insulins were shown to increase appetite. So that would be pretty much the only benefit over other insulins using it for a cut. I would do, using a long-acting insulin though too during cutting, I don't overly like the idea of it. Not because of the dangers. I mean, the dangers of insulin are way overblown. Not because I'm worried that you're going to go hypo. Like studies show, out of the suicide rates, people not eating and injecting, various amounts of insulin, hundreds of IUs, only less than 2%, like 1.7% could only achieve suicide with insulin. So a bodybuilder eating and using the doses we use, we're not going to have any issues. But the reason I don't like insulin for cutting, in general, is that even insulin's anti-catabolic effects, if blood glucose drops too low, insulin's anti-catabolic effects are still not enough to prevent catabolism. A study showed when blood sugar dropped too low, even with insulin in use, amino acid dumping started happening. So, it's very tricky, depending on how you bulk. If you do well with lots of carbs in your, cutting, if you do well with lots of carbs in your cut, then insulin could be used. But if you're always on the verge of just a normal blood glucose level and you're using insulin, it's dropping it a little lower, it's not, I don't see it being beneficial and actually determinal for a lot of people. What did I miss? I don't think I missed anything. For foods to combat anxiety and depression, there'll be specific foods out there that'll show, like tomatoes help you sleep. And there'll be specific foods with stuff like melatonin in it and stuff that would help you sleep. But I wouldn't so much look at foods, but mainly certain vitamins and minerals that'll help with depression and anxiety. So sorry, what I mean with that is, like, say B3 is shown to help with anxiety. So I'd more so look for foods high in B3. Best way to do that is sites like Whole Foods List. Those sites, search up all the foods highest in B3 versus just looking for particular foods in general. Because usually when a food has a benefit, it's due to the high, a specific vitamin and mineral, or, a specific component in that food sometimes. How do you properly bulk with Deca without getting fat? How many pounds can you typically gain per week while on 400 milligrams of Deca? How do you keep the gains and not get fat after PCT? So how do you properly bulk with Deca without getting fat? Well, you shouldn't be getting fat, period. Studies on Deca show that there was increased fat loss, and the fat loss on animal studies particularly, when you up the dose, the fat loss kept increasing, but the muscle gain stopped. So with any anabolic, it's going to increase your fat loss than you would have naturally. So if you're worried about getting fat on Deca, there's something else going on in your diet. You would naturally be gaining fat, and it's okay to gain some fat, but you're not looking to gain much fat at all when you're bulking. So something's wrong with your diet. If you're gaining fat on Deca, something is wrong with your diet. You should have an increased fat loss. What else was the other question? How do you keep the gains and not get fatter after PCT? So one of the big things why I like Deca over test, as many of you know, for cycles, is because what you see with Deca is what you keep. When you run testosterone, you see so many guys, they'll gain 20 pounds within 4 weeks of their cycle. They come off, lose almost all their gains. They keep a couple pounds, and then they become scared to come off cycle because they think they can't come off cycle, or they'll just lose all their gains. So, but when you come off a cycle within 2, 3, even 4 weeks, and you're dropping 15 pounds of weight, it's not muscle you're losing. It's impossible to lose muscle that fast, basically. It's all water weight. So for a prior test user, that's a common, an issue people say, I don't want to come off because I'm scared to lose gains after PCT. Your muscle isn't going to drop that fast. What you've normally encountered has been water loss. You see guys that look okay on a test cycle, they come off, they lose almost all their gains. It looks like they never even cycle. You'll notice with all my followers who use the Deca base, whether it's 10, 15, 20 pounds, however long the cycle, whatever they gain, they come off, they lose a couple pounds max. And back when I was cycling, one of my first examples, I always used to tell people, I got to a certain weight on the cycle, and I was like, okay, I'm going to come off. I come off, and it was something like 6 months later. I was barely training, barely doing anything, and out of nowhere, I noticed I still almost looked the same, even without training a lot. I still looked the same, and it's one of the things I realized. I was like, okay, so what I actually gained on this Deca cycle was actually muscle, versus all my test prior cycles. I jump up 20 pounds, come off, and look like I barely even did a cycle. So test and Deca difference in bulking is it messes with your bulk in another way, for the fact that you go up 10, 15 pounds thinking it's actually muscle. You're thinking, okay, I'm eating enough, I'm gaining weight, but majority of it's just water, so you're never actually eating enough to gain in the first place. And that's why when you come off, you lose all that weight. Versus a Deca cycle, you realize, hey, I'm not gaining weight fast. That's why many people say, oh, Deca's a weak anabolic, because they're not shooting up 20 pounds in 4 weeks. It's like, no, it's not that it's a weak anabolic. It's just that you're not gaining 20 pounds of water weight. So you start eating on Deca, and you're like, I'm not going up as fast. You realize, hey, I actually have to eat more. And then you actually eat more and gain that weight. When you come off, you realize, hey, this is actual muscle. It's hard to lose. I'm keeping this muscle. It's not going anywhere. So that's one of the big benefits, is that you can actually bulk and see what you're gaining versus, thinking you're gaining and just gaining water weight. What is the general philosophy when it comes to hormones while cutting? Do you still prefer short cycles? That one's a little tricky. So the studies on anabolics and their strength and growth have been shown that they're only short term. You know, like the one 12-week study where 90% of the strength and size gains were seen in the first 6 weeks. Going another 6 weeks to 12 weeks only netted a 10% gain in strength and size, which is likely due to the anti-catabolism effect. Versus cutting, that's a little tricky. The studies kind of vary on that, and then it's kind of an individual thing. You know, you have a contest date, you know, wherever you started. Let's say you're 8 weeks away, you're starting short, then I would stay on. But if one is staying on for a contest and it's going to be a long cycle, every 6 weeks I would continue to up the dose. Not just for the cutting effects, but for the muscle and strength gains. I would continue to up the dose so you keep continuing to get the more beneficial effects. What's this thing I'm hearing about clenbuterol used as androgen resensitizer? I think mainly you're talking about it increases androgen receptor expression. Yeah, so a few different drugs like clenbuterol will increase your androgen receptor expression, which is, you know, the strength the receptor is responding to the drug. The article I'm releasing shortly is going to be you know, on the sensitivity we have to receptors. Sorry, just reading another comment. Yeah, I'm going to be releasing an article in the next few weeks, which is going to be on receptor sensitivity and what all, you know, herbs, vitamins, minerals, you know, just anything in general, or drugs that are proven to increase receptor expression to drugs. Because like studies show, you know, they had groups of low and high serum androgen levels, and then they had groups with high and low androgen receptor content. Regardless of the serum levels of the androgens, that had nothing to do with the patient's response to training via hypertrophy or strength. The only thing that mattered was their reaction to the actual androgens due to their receptor content, not the androgen serum levels themselves. What's your favorite exercises for medial tricep head? Medial tricep head. The best items for your medial tricep is things that you go on a lockout for. So bench dips and skull crushers where there's a lockout. How long a Deca cycle should be to avoid problems with PCT and possibility of Deca after cycle, as I understand it is from DHN binding to receptors. So no, that's not true. So there's a big thing, they say the issue with Deca in that regards is from DHN binding to receptors in place of DHT. That's false, and the reason that's false is, let me give you a few examples. So this only happens in situations in place of tests with Deca. When you have tests, you're still creating DHT. When you have Deca, you're creating DHN. People are under this assumption that DHN is going to take the place of DHT in the specific receptors. That's not true at all. As studies show, it was somewhere estimated around 3,000 milligrams that it would take for an androgen to kick another androgen out, to take the place of another androgen, basically. You know, the stronger androgen would win over the weaker androgen in the receptor. So when people are running 500 milligrams test and 500 milligrams Deca, and, you know, 10% or whatever of tests is converted into DHT, they're thinking that 1,000 milligram cycle DHN is taking the place of DHT, when that's not true. You're running 500 or 1,000 milligrams of test, you're getting, your 10% of DHT still. Not the DHN isn't kicking anything out or taking the place of anything. You have a high amount of DHT and a high amount of DHN. That's not happening. That's a complete myth. And studies have shown this. So that's why that part is a complete myth. What you're talking about, the issue there, is with, so there's no reports of any libido issues with Deca in the World Health Organization. There's never been, and it's been used, in HIV/AIDS patients. It's been used in athletes for joints. There's never been a report of that ever. And same with old bodybuilders. You ask them about it, they've never heard of it. It was never a thing. It was only a recent thing to the 90s where people started using test and Deca together. And the reason this happens is twofold. One, with Deca and test, you're increasing the sensitivity to prolactin and your aromatization. So, test alone, even studies showing TRT, you can have, it can raise prolactin slightly out of range, even just on TRT levels. And we know estrogen and prolactin's effects on libido, so how bad they are. So when you add in Deca, you're actually making test more of a powerhouse in the estrogen and prolactin range, because as studies show on Deca alone, it actually lowered prolactin in comparison to test. So the issue with that only arises when you run test and Deca. And again, that's because test is a powerhouse of estrogen and prolactin on its own. You go and run something that makes you, example, more sensitive to prolactin. Now, test is even more of a powerhouse of prolactin and estrogen. I missed a couple comments there. But yeah, so to sum it up, no, you running test and Deca, unless you're running 3,000 milligrams test and 3,000 milligrams Deca, only then the DHN would be competing for the DHT. So you're not running those doses. That's not happening. Do you run HCG on a Deca only cycle? Do you taper off the Deca? No, I don't like tapering off, especially if you're using Deca at such a long EC to begin with. When you're done your cycle, you finish the cycle and you're done. HCG, no, there's no point. Unless somebody makes so little estrogen on Deca solo, would you run HCG to give yourself a little estrogen boost? There's no need for testosterone when you're on Deca. Deca is filling all the, the gene-related effects going on at the androgen receptor. Deca is filling those roles, and it's converting to estrogen. HCG does have some benefits in restoring a few other hormones, because when you run any hormone, you're shutting yourself down, right? Countless hormones are getting lowered by running a steroid and shutting down your, your HPTA axis. Melatonin is lowered. Cortisol is lowered. Many people think, oh, that's a benefit, lowering cortisol. But no, as we see in animal studies, Addison's disease-like states can appear from anabolic steroids, and that's basically bottom out cortisol. Cortisol is needed for the utilization of protein, carbs, and fats. It's needed for optimal digestion. It's needed for energy production to get you out. That's why it's so high in the morning. It's up to get you out of bed in the morning. It's you need it for energy. So lowering cortisol is not good. Having cortisol in a normal range is good. Too low is bad and too high is bad. How safe is Primo to run with Deca and D-ball? So you can run any drug you want. What I always say to people is, what sides do you want to avoid? So if somebody gets bad appetite issues off orals, then you don't run orals. And same with tren, because tren will cause a colitis of the liver, just like orals. So if you have poor appetite, then for bulking, you don't want to run those items. Primo, even though it's regarded as a safer DHT derivative, in my personal experience, as many know, majority of my people that come to me usually end up being hair loss sufferers. Primo, even when it's tested as real Primo, I do not consider it a safe hair loss drug. I consider it a little bit safer than other ones. So if you're not too concerned with hair loss, run a lot of it. I think it's a great drug. I think it really helps when you're bulking, keeping the fat off. As we know, DHT derivatives do tend to have a stronger effect with fat loss. So Deca D-ball Primo to me is a great drug trying to help keep you growing lean. And then if one is very hair loss prone, I would run it very low, like 50 to 100 milligrams a week, and that is enough to still give you a great benefit. Currently running 100 milligrams Tren every other day, 50 milligrams VAR every day, and 300 milligrams Test E. How to get the max out of this? What's your opinion? What do you mean by get the max out of it? Max it a bit for, you know, bulking or cutting, and what do you mean by changing doses around, or just not sure. I mean by most of it. For me, if I was to think of running that cycle, tests had always given me very bad estrogenic sides. I would drop the test out or run it at TRT or lower doses. In Tren, you know, that's a really bad hair loss drug for some. So, you know, when you ask what to run this as it's all dependent on the sides you want to avoid and the side effects that you get. You know, Tren and VAR will ruin somebody's appetite, but I'm assuming this is a cutting cycle. So I'm just not sure what you mean by get the most out of it, or the max out of it. I might have missed the question there. The old questions aren't staying up on the page, and I know some of them I talked long about, so the ones I missed, repost, so you can ask whatever other ones. You missed Uran question. Irfan's. What did he say? Because I can't scroll back down and see it. Can you list all bad hair loss drugs for the unaware? I'm assuming you mean. So hair loss is a little individual in the sense where one person might be able to run, you know, 100 milligrams primo and be pretty decent, but they run a harsher androgen and they'll get hair loss. So my experience, so, you know, the studies on rats where they'll do, you know, the androgenic effects on the prostate, those don't seem to line too much up with human use, because, you know, you look at a Winstrol, it's going to scalp people, like bald them within weeks, even people who aren't fully hair prone, or so they think, yet it has a decently low androgenic rating. So, you know, like I said, I'm known as a hair loss safe guy, you know, what drugs to run. In my experience, the only one that will not cause hair loss in anybody out of, you know, my hundreds of followers that have hair loss is Deca. Never produces hair loss in anyone regardless of the dose. So if somebody's a very bad hair loss sufferer, they want to run grams of Deca, go ahead. I've never seen it cause hair loss. The next one would be D-ball. Out of my hundreds of guys over several years, I've only had maybe one or two report that D-ball caused some slight thinning, and that's it. And that's even doses upwards of 100, 200 milligrams a day or more. There's, you know, never seen hair loss. Every single one out, I've seen cause hair loss, whether it's minor or medium or a lot. I've always seen every single one cause hair loss. So if you're super hair loss prone, Deca and then D-ball. Literally everything else seems to carry a minor risk. Even the so-called safe ones like Anavar and Primo, and even when tested. Deca only dose for someone extremely prone to estrogen. So Jake, out of, again, my experience when I cycled and everybody else that I know, mine was I'd pop 30 milligrams a test and I'd get gyno. And same with so many other people, 30 milligrams, yeah, I think I said test. And so many other people I know that would run tests, low doses, under TRT or TRT, no matter the timing, daily, you know what I mean? Just figuring everything out perfect for stable levels, would get gyno. They would switch to Deca, run literally even grams and not get gyno. There's been, out of hundreds of my users over several years, maybe two that I've reported gyno with Deca, in which I think something else was going on, maybe their Deca mixed with test or just something, but like it is almost impossible for me to have seen gyno with Deca, no matter the dose. What are the benefits of high androgen steroid? It masculinizes females, but it doesn't even deepen a man's voice. What the benefit does it give masculinity to whites and men? Most health. Well, the stronger the androgen appears to have stronger fat loss, so that's one of the benefits. The stronger androgens always appear to have better strength gains. Like many people know, when they go to Deca only, their strength is nowhere near as good as a stronger androgen cycle. So, you know, if you're a power lifter, you know, just the straight anabolics might not be as good for you in that regard. Is it possible to keep the same leanness and body fat percent and weight post PCT as well on tren? Many people actually feel flat on tren. Actually, the people who feel hard and lean on tren, I think, are more far in between. And a lot of people think, oh, it's because tren doing something with their thyroid or something. They say burning through carbs. That's not it at all. It's that its effects on your glucose uptake, actually, so it can make a lot of people flat. And then the lucky ones, they're tight, hard, and lean. You won't be as lean looking. You know, all steroids have the little glycogen benefit. You know what I mean? You won't carry that same water in the muscles when you were off steroids, so you're never going to look as good as when you're on steroids as off. Can I talk a little bit about tren? I hate it. It's not one I suggest. I find it destroys most people's hair, not everybody. It destroys your appetite. That's a big reason too. You know, somebody's trying to eat a lot of protein, whether it's for a bulk or cut, it destroys most people's appetite. And even though it can, for a lot of people, be you can rid that appetite lowering effect with TUDCA and items like that, but I just don't. I rarely suggest it. I sometimes do. I just don't think it's worth it. Anything you can do to stop post-injection pain with DHB? It crashes at room temperature. Even when you heat it up, it's extremely painful. It feels like poison. When gear crashes, it's usually because it's too high a concentration in your, you know, whatever it's made in. A lot of times labs will put a lot of benzyl alcohol to keep it in solution when it's in the actual, you know, your oil, whatever they used. And then when you inject it in your body, the alcohol is gone very quickly. The body will, you know, the alcohol is gone and in and out of the depot very quickly. And then you're just left with the oil and the hormone, and then it crashes. The only thing you can do is you get a filter and cut it with, you know, another oil, whatever oil you want to use, and make it lesser concentration. Or you can cut it with something like Deca that's made well, you know, like 200 milligrams a milliliter. You know, then you could cut it with it and it might stay, or you could add some more benzyl bentonate, which I don't like. So no matter what you're gonna do, you're gonna have to cut it with something like another drug that stays easier in solution, or add something on your own. I missed a lot of questions here. What time is it by you? It's 3 a.m. Yeah, it's 3 a.m. for me too. I missed a lot of questions and I can't bring them back up. That's one thing I hate about this. If you guys remember the questions that were asked that I missed, go ahead and ask them again. Actually, I found I can scroll up on when I make it bigger here. So, I think I answered that one. But even if you lose your hair, you can, okay, higher tan, help regrow it. Yeah, people haven't seen my hair loss article on my website. Just throwing questions out there. When are you going to post an article about 6 weeks on, 4 weeks off? Soon, maybe within a week, maybe two, because I want to do a video with it. So I'm just waiting till I do the video. Because I'm going to be posting the videos to YouTube. And when I did that, I kind of wanted, there's also, I was first originally planning till I started working out again, and then started on a cycle too. So just when I did the YouTube videos, you know, people like to look at you and be like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I was gonna wait for that, but I might not, because I keep saying, oh, I'm gonna start working out again this weekend, and then I keep not working out. What else did I miss? I think I'm missing new questions too. Yeah, I am. Test only for TRT or test in mass iron. Depends on the dosages and what you're doing. I don't believe in anything above like 100 milligrams for most people TRT. Any and all steroids are going to increase your calcium uptake, your CA2 levels. You know, and then as studies show that it's more duration than dose that'll have the dangerous heart effects for steroids. So, you know, when people are running 200 milligrams of one item or multiple items for TRT, that's, you know, you're just playing with your health, and I don't like that at all. So if you're doing tests only and you felt you could require some benefits for TRT with massive Provan, I would run a very low dose. Like, you know, your DHT that you're converting from tests already is only about 10%, so about, you know, 7 milligrams equal to a week. I'd run mass like 10 milligrams a week, you know, like 1 milligram every other day, just to get the extra benefit. And that still puts you at double your normal DHT, because you have the tests they're converting as well. I've been reading about Deca only protocol. I see it does not raise prolactin levels, but what about progesterone? Does it not increase progesterone? It's like only with these related. So I'm not sure what you mean related progesterone issues. I mean, progesterone normally, you know, obviously any hormone you normally don't want it off the charts, but progesterone has many great benefits. It would aid many, such as inhibits prolactin binding, estrogen. So it kind of acts as an anti-estrogen via the receptors. Even though it can increase sensitivity, it's, you know, Deca is not a progesterone drug. You know, it's not exactly progesterone in and of itself. That's why it has different effects as progesterone. But progesterone has many benefits for males. It's not progesterone. You know, progesterone isn't bad like people think. It's actually a very wonderful drug with many health benefits. I seem to be getting bombarded with people saying training to failure is not better than being near failure, providing adequate stimulation is reach. I don't trust that. I took my set to my all, if not, but pain in my elbows means I better learn quick if I don't want to end up in surgery. Studies kind of go back and forth with failure. So I'm showing that training to failure. So the thing is, studies are all over the place with training, because one study, you know, for failure, the volume would be super high. You know, volume's just all over the place. You know, there's too many variables that count for. There's one great study I liked a lot where they did failure. They told people to go to self-perceived failure, group one. The first group was not go to failure. The second group was go to failure, you know, self-perceived, go it on your own. And the third group was they forced people to go to failure. They ensured that they went to failure. And the group that just did not go to failure saw absolutely no growth. When the group that self-perceived failure saw okay growth, minor, you know, I'm just quoting what I remember from the study. And then the group that was forced to grow to failure saw immense growth all across the board. So, you know, we have to factor in training volumes as well, because I believe there was another study that going to failure, but the volume was absurdly high. And just like studies showed, too much, you know, there's that new study that showed, oh, more volume is better. You know, there was more growth the more Sechi did, a very recent one. But then there's an older study where they said too much volume actually caused atrophy of the muscle. It actually caused you to shrink. So we have to factor in volume and intensity always. So I always put training back to real world results here, which is you see bodybuilders pick one side or the other. If they go to failure, they use lower volumes, not necessarily low, just lower. And if they don't go to failure, they you know, stop shy sorry, they don't go to failure, they do a little more volume. Like, there's so many studies are saying so many different things, and they kind of go back to what a lot of bodybuilders actually do. But the one issue I have is with the non-failure training study, and sorry, the group that didn't go to failure, then the self-perceived, and then the failure study was that, you know, the group that didn't do almost saw no growth. Like, we know intensity is needed. Just like the one study where it's something like 6 or 8 reps versus 30 reps. I forget, you know, the intensity load for each, I don't even remember the reps. Anyways, I think it was something around there. But the growth was the same in the low rep group as the high rep group, and the difference is that they both reached failure. That was the study. So, you know, that shows us that, you know, regardless, what were you saying? You know, intensity is, you know, is a key factor. It's just like, if you were to do 30% of your 1 rep max for, you know, nowhere near failure, you're not going to see any growth from that. You know, intensity is a factor. People keep talking about today, volume is the biggest factor. It's like, okay, I could do 100,000 reps or something, but if it, you know, like curling my finger, I'm not going to grow from that. I'm not. Like, it's a mixture of intensity and volume, and people keep seeming to forget about intensity. Intensity has to be definitely very high, if not maxed out. So if you want to cruise on Deca for HRT after doing 6 on 4 off protocols, should I start 200 milligrams and see how my E looks from there? I tend to convert pretty easily. If you're going to cruise, yes, many people know I like, Deca should be around 200 milligrams for a cruise. That's what I would do, and see how your estrogen is. Tren and Deca, 350 Tren and 600 Deca a week. Yeah, I mean, I don't like Tren. I think that's a good combo. Yeah, it's a pretty decent dosage of drugs, or combo. How hair safe is EQ? Can it be run solo like Deca? EQ can be run solo because it converts to estrogen. D-ball, EQ, Deca, while the ones you can run solo and Ment. Hair safe. So, you know, again, the ratings, it's shown it's a lesser androgenic drug on the rating charts for prostate for rats, but real world results, absolutely no. You see it online to be, oh, EQ's a milder drug, it's safe, you know, it's used for when, you know, women can use it and whatnot, but somebody with hair loss experience and, you know, immense amounts of clients with hair loss, EQ is a very harsh drug on hair. I would say it's much harsher than test. So yeah. Minimum calorie intake during cycle to gain muscle. That's very tricky. Everybody's, you know, very individual. I'm releasing an article soon on calorie intake and if it fits your macros, and versus just focusing on macros and calories. I never give out calorie suggestions or macro suggestions for the most part. I only ever give out food suggestions. This is one example that's going to be in the article. Cooked fats vary calories by 30%. That's massive, right? Let's say you have somebody in the bulk, they want to get easy calories, so they're drinking their fat, they're using oils, okay? You know, a tablespoon of olive oil, this or that, you know, that's very common, obviously. Then they go to cutting, and they're not going to be drinking oils. They want filling foods. They're going to eat, you know, maybe a steak to get some of their fats, like a fatty steak. You know, wherever they're getting their fats, they generally want to eat it because they're not having many calories. However, the fat's now cooked. They're now getting 30% more calories than they normally would. So there's countless variables like this that I'm putting in my if it fits your macros thing, why I never suggest just based off calories or macros, and why I focus on food choices. You know, if I'm giving a diet to somebody and, you know, I'm making up their fat choices, I'm going to be like, eat nuts, eat this, eat that. And I always tell people, if you want to change something, tell me first. Don't just switch something out for an oil, because you could severely be altering your calorie intake, again, upwards 30% for the fats alone, just by making a food choice. So, yeah, so I never go by just off calories, like, at all. How many pounds per week of weight do you suggest gaining while on the bulk? So you're supposed to, you're going to gain 30 pounds or something in 6 weeks.
Frank, that's all in the individual and their diet. As you see, some people will gain and they'll just gain lean. And some people, they'll start gaining and they'll start gaining fat easily. There's a lot of factors to play in that. Some of your hormones not accounted for when you're doing a cycle, like T4 was one of them that showed easier weight gain when it was lower. Obviously, you know, your metabolism. So, you know, there's multiple hormones that you could be gaining fat easier than the next guy, and then your diet choices. So if I have a guy where everything is, you know, his whole whatever genetic or hormone profile is great, and you can tell he's going to gain weight easily and lean, then you just shoot for the sky. You shoot it for the sky on all foods that help you grow lean. Like I said, my If It Fits Your Macros article I'm going to release soon, which is another thing, is polyunsaturated fats. One study did, I think, 750 calories extra a day. Polyunsaturated fats versus saturated fats. The polyunsaturated fats group gained almost entirely muscle. And actually, studies show it can help prevent fat gain. Then the saturated fat group gained almost entirely fat. So, you know, that's another problem I have with macros. Somebody say, hey, here's your bulk, go eat 70 grams of fat. Well, if they eat a whole bunch of saturated fats, because that's what they prefer and that's what they like, they could be gaining a whole bunch more, you know, they're not bulking optimally. They're going to gain a whole bunch more fat than if they picked a fat that helps you gain lean. You know, polyunsaturated fats help insulin sensitivity. Saturated fats across the board have always shown to lower insulin sensitivity. So if somebody has a perfect diet with the right, it's not just macros, it's micronutrients too. The optimal micronutrients like phosphorus was shown when it's added to diet, when it's added to a meal plan, that it added muscle growth when the protein, carbs, and fats and calories were all equated for. So having your micronutrients in place and your macronutrients in place, and then you're in the right zone to grow lean, and how many pounds to gain for. I shoot for all optimal amounts of the right micros and macros, sorry, not macros, food choices. And then most guys, you know, they eat an insane amount of these right food choices and they just keep growing lean. And like you see, the one guy, he did gain 30 pounds in 6 weeks, and he's like, I forget, 5 weeks off cycle now, and he's lost like 2 pounds. And the only reason he lost 2 pounds is he hasn't been able to train. He hurt his back during PCD because he had prior back issues. He hasn't been training, he hasn't been eating much, and he literally looks about the same. So that's why food choices matter so much. Deca only for first cycle. Dosage 150 pounds, 45 years old. So your cycle. For me, I say if you're going to shut your body down, you know, and cause possible health effects, I wouldn't do it for anything for punny gains. What I mean by that is, you know, let's say you're going to shut yourself, as studies show, the more you use, the more muscle you gain and the more fat loss you got. So if I was going to shut myself down, I'm not going to shut myself down for 2 pounds and, you know, barely any fat loss. I just wouldn't, you know, it's your health. So usually, you know, I don't like to suggest doses, but I like to give people recommended guidelines. So as studies show, it's estimated around 3,000 milligrams to fully saturate your receptors. Estimated. So for me, I will not shut myself down for anything less than 400 milligrams. However, gains are not linear as the dose goes up. So, you know, let's say 1,000 milligrams gets you 10 pounds, 2,000 milligrams won't get you 20 pounds. It's not linear. It really starts cutting off. A first cycle, no less than 600 milligrams is what I wouldn't shut myself down for. Anything less than that. First cycle, I would probably say upwards 900 milligrams is what I would do. Again, I'm not going to put my body under harm for crap gains. A lot of people have this thought, you know, go low and slow. And, you know, a study showed that the heart effects of steroids were more due to duration than dose. And like the study showed, other studies, 90% of gains were seen in the first 6 weeks. Going an extra 6 weeks only netted 10% gains. And releasing the article on that soon about why that is. So you want to go in hard and then get out, and that's where you're going to see majority of your gains, and skip out on the issue of the suggested heart-related sides due to duration and dose. So you might as well go in hard. I would do like 900 milligrams, and I would get out after the 6 weeks. You gain immense more muscle, and you're not on. I don't know why people think today, it's like you see these guys doing lower dose 500 milligrams for 16, 20 weeks. And it's, I don't, just in the process in their head, they think, oh, it's just 500 milligrams. I'm okay, I can go 16, 20 weeks and go on a cruise of 200 milligrams and then do another cycle and another cycle. And to me, I think that's way more dangerous. I'd rather gain my, like you see my client there, hey, gain my 30 pounds in my 6 weeks, come off, short break, and then do another blast, and just do a couple short blasts, get to where you are and you're happy, and then call it quits. So do you think near failure is good enough to provide adequate volume is reached? Absolutely. What do you think about fasting shown to increase androgen receptor? Any studies on keto or carnivore doing similar? Is there a relation between insulated sensitivity and androgen receptor? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, on fasting, I suggest, if you're trying to bulk, I don't think fasting is the best way to go about it, and that's when androgen receptor sensitivity matters the most. So I wouldn't recommend that regardless of that. Especially as guys get bigger, they need a lot more calories as you go on. And I think it's best to stimulate protein synthesis as much as possible. Not, within 3 hours apart at least, never sooner, due to the one study on animals showing that it blunts. It's going to hurt your muscle growth. Trying to boost protein synthesis sooner than every 3 hours. Your amino acid uptake. How do you know when adequate stimulation is reached? Then, when to move to the next exercise or body part? When more than 10% strength loss is achieved, or you have a different recommendation? So my whole training philosophy is very, after all my research and everything like that, I've always come down to a conclusion that what pro bodybuilders do, which they've learned through experience, they've tried it all. They're like you and me, they've tried it all, and they came to a conclusion that, hey, this way is better, whatever way they're doing. People always say, oh, genetics, this and that, and it's like, okay, let's say your whole life is bodybuilding to be as big as possible, and you make money off this. So and it's your heart, it is your passion, your heart and soul is in this. You're going to do a training program or whatever that gives you less results. That makes no sense. It's a passion for a lot of you guys. Why would you do a program that gives you less results? Most of these guys, they grew up doing more frequency, more than, they did everything, and they came, and it's funny that 90% of the pro bodybuilders came to the same conclusion, which I find a lot of newer studies is backing up more and more as they come out. Such as the frequency was always posted, which was very faulty. I feel the original studies, 3 times a week and whatever. Yet bodybuilders kept saying, no, I feel like I'm growing better with once a week, and they're just lazy, this or that. But that makes no sense. This is their heart and soul and passion. Like many of you guys, you think this is your heart, soul, your passion, and your income. You're going to put less effort into. Like it makes no sense. And like I said, newer studies keep showing more and more, kind of leaning towards what pro bodybuilders today do is the most optimal. With the failure part, we know for sure by studies and real world results is that near failure or failure seems to be the best. So how do you know what's adequate? Again, what bodybuilders say, go by feeling, and I found this true for most people. Studies, a moderate volume approach is always best to go at it, around 10 sets. I say for most body parts, more being better for the most part. I'm being a little modest with the volume suggestion here. But you should know, anybody that's trained for a while, they go into the gym and the pump starts fading regardless of your carbs and whatnot, and you just start to feel really weak and drained. Like, when you get to that point, that's usually, it means it's enough. Greg just said, also, Canadian recommends to move to the next exercise when a loss of 10% meaningless reps has occurred. That's again going by feeling. When do you know you have to up dosage? For example, 500 milligrams Deca 30 milligrams Devo for 6 weeks. After 4 weeks off, just run the same dosage. There's no study showing, you know what I mean, after you run this dose, you're not going to gain any more or a good amount off that same dose again. There's no study showing that. The dose you run, you can get the same great results after you let your receptors recover. You don't need to up it. If you want to up it, you will gain more. So that is totally up to you there. What's this? Just HCG for a month with nothing else and you'll be ready for PCT. Well, HCG just helps kickstart your testicles, right? I usually don't like HCG too much because it doesn't restart the pituitary, and for most people I find it causes very bad prolactin and estrogen spikes, and it doesn't restart, so that's why I always prefer Clomid. How to do PCT on Deca only? Clomid, it's the most proven one to restart, you know, not just your testosterone, but also your adrenals, too, cortisol and whatnot. So I always suggest Clomid is my main one, and for 6 weeks, it's based off studies. I never got a clear answer, just a bunch of different ones. Clomid most likely expired or something. 4 weeks of expired bad Clomid, 25 milligrams, and taurine a day, still left my LH and FSH and testosterone 0. What should I do? Aim to recover, get back to normal levels. I think we talked about this in PM. Make sure your Clomid's real and try again. You know, Clomid's not going to work in everybody. If it doesn't work in you, you might be screwed, right? You know, there's primary and secondary hypogonadism. Try the Clomid again. Make sure it's real. It's the most proven one, especially it's been proven on bodybuilders countless times. Hold on one second. I think my phone is about to die here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, should be good. What do you think of Bill Roberts short protocol? 50 milligrams tren, 50 milligrams D-ball a day for 2 weeks. I mean, I don't like 2 weeks particularly. I see you're not going to get any benefit. I think you're possibly still going to get shut down. You know, why wouldn't you do 4 to 6 weeks? Going by real world effects here, you'll notice most guys will gain majority, and like studies show, but just by the people's results, you gain well into the 4th week. I don't know why you'd come off sooner. I know there's a theory in hopes that, oh, you won't get shut down, but just a theory, and especially if you're running 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, which I think is a suggestion, you know, you're going to get shut down eventually. If not the first 2 weeks, the next one you will. So yeah, I would still run it and optimize the gain by going to 4 to 6 weeks. I'm curious, I don't want to out your price, but hiring you for coaching in the future, would it be around the ballpark of 400 to 600 a month, or is it going to be more? Would it be on the, yeah, a lot less than 400 to 600 a month. Do you recommend running Deca cycle short to 6 weeks intervals, even though people say you need to run Deca for at least 12 weeks for it to work? Absolutely not. That's false. There's studies on long-term, long Easters where majority of the results are still seen within the first few weeks. And there's a guide out there on the Easters, the half-life, which is totally wrong, which is all over forums. If you actually look at the pharmacokinetic papers, Deca's half-life is only 6 days, 2 days longer than test D. If you look at the blood levels of Deca within 24 hours, it's already at a good amount. Regardless, it's going to stop working basically within 6 weeks, and my article is going to explain why. So yeah, I know 6 weeks even with Deca. Thanks, Taeian. Just wanted to revisit. I'll get on those files when I'm feeling better. That's about the Clomid. There's 3. How can I know your coaching fees? You can PM me. I just don't want to say in the video because my prices will vary, especially when I raised them recently, and I'll probably be raising them in the future again, just for the amount of time I'm putting in. So I just don't want to say, and somebody sees this and be like, oh, it's this amount, and then they, it's like months later, they message me being like, oh, I thought your price is this, just to avoid any confusing. So just send me a PM. I think I got all the questions. Yeah, it's 3:30 here. I think I'm going to shut down in a minute as well. Am I training again? No. I started training like a couple months ago. I got in the gym for like 2 weeks. I was planning on sticking at it, and then I just fell off, which has been issue for the past few years now. I get back in the gym, go for like 2 weeks, and I just fall right off, and do that every few months. I've been a fair few months. I'm eating like once or twice a day, just snacking, no training, and obviously I don't do TRT. I don't need it, and I don't believe in it for most men. How long should you wait to start PCT on Deca only? And does it look the same like every other cycle? I asked, of course, Deca increases E2 and prolactin sensitivity, right? Depending here, generally, like, based off the last dose you used as well, because you don't want it in your system for when you come off the Clomid. Generally it depends too on your end goal. If you just want a quick restart, then right away, and you're going to run a cycle sometime soon. But if you want a proper long-term recovery and you want the drug fully out of your system, about 3 to 4-ish weeks to start it. There's a big myth out there, and I'm releasing an article in a few days as well about what items actually work while you're on the drugs. That actually keep you covered while you're on, and you actually can start Clomid sooner, and it's actually going to work even when the drug is still active, actually, which is a big myth that it doesn't. It's a big myth that started, and it's never been proven, that it doesn't not work. So I don't even know where it came from. Cayenne pepper for hemorrhoids, does it have to be in water, or can you cap the cayenne and eat it? It can be a cap, but I suggest water. When you take the capsule and it bursts inside your stomach, it usually feels like you got punched in the stomach, and it kills for like 10 minutes straight. When you have it in the hot water and your taste buds taste the hotness, it prepares your stomach for it, and it just feels hot. It doesn't feel like your stomach is very sore and for good. It's painful, trust me. So if you want to do a blast for 4 weeks, it doesn't matter if I do short or long acting ethers. No, it doesn't matter. What does matter is if you do the short ethers, you can come off for a shorter break to get back on your next cycle sooner. If you do the long ether, you're going to require a longer break for your receptors to return back to normal, so you get the same effects and gains as you did. Can Primo and NPP be stacked well together? Thinking of replacing tests with MBT and 50 milligrams anadrol. Yep. Any drug is good together, period, depending on your sides. You get bad side effects like hair loss. Any and all the DHCs will likely increase it. Trend being just a strong androgen can worsen your hair loss too. So it all depends on your sides. You're worried about DHT related sides, you might want to avoid the DHTs. But yeah, so NPP and anything, just be aware of the size. Example, you're very estrogenic prone, you might not want to run tests. So yeah, literally anything with anything. What is the most powerful bulking stack? Tricky. A lot of powerful anabolics, and you know, just keep running the dosage as high as you want. Again, that comes down to sides. If you have bad appetite off orals, then I'm not going to suggest tren or any orals. So you know, it's very individual. That question, I feel, usually needs to be answered with what's the best bulking stack with the least sides. Because for me, Deca and D-ball, of course, the D-ball can kill some people's appetite, but Deca and D-ball I feel is very well rounded and great. And then if hair loss really isn't an issue at all, adding Primo, you know, it's so tricky because, you know, the side effects, if you're trying to bulk and you cannot eat, you know, the orals get a little too high, or tren destroys your appetite even at 100 milligrams. Because tren is a great drug, but if you can't eat on 100 milligrams of tren, you're not going to grow optimally. It is all about food, and you know, it's always has been all about food. So it is so tricky. So usually Deca and D-ball, if there's bad appetite effects, it's such a tricky thing because every cycle I base off is based off the person's side effects that they want to avoid and that they get. What was I saying? Forget what I was saying to go with that. So yeah, it's based off your side effects is you running, you know what I mean? Let's say you can only run Deca and D-ball, and you know, let's say Primo's great, but you can't run it because of hair loss. That's not going to matter at the end of the day. Honestly, the drug combos and the drug amounts are very low on the scale of your results. People, you know, they really like to make it out to be drugs, but it's not. You know, there's old bodybuilders of the past, like Gold Gym co-founder P.D. Grimkowski, however you say, he ran over 3,000 milligrams a day. There's in Dr. Robert Kerr's book from the 60s, 70s, 80s, he mentions bodybuilders running 7 bottles of D-ball a day. You know, and these guys are a lot smaller than today. It's not the drugs. You know, the best bulking stack that you're going to pick, it's not going to make a very big difference at the end of the day. Like, it's really not. Your training and diet is what's going to really make that big difference. What's good dosage to run of NPP on a quick 4-week blast? I typically run 600 to 900 milligrams of Deca on a 4-week blast. So like the study on testosterone, the short-acting ester versus the long-acting ester, it showed that there was almost double the nitrogen retention of the long-acting ester. Is that due to the increased estrogen? Because the longer ester also had more estrogen. We don't know. Maybe something else with it gave it better nitrogen retention. So usually short esters, you might have to run a little bit more. What's a good dose of the NPP? Like I said earlier, if I'm going to shut myself down, I'm not going to shut myself down for less than about 600 milligrams. 400 milligrams bare minimum. Upwards 3,000 milligrams is where your receptors are possibly saturated, estimated by some studies. What was I saying? For me, like I said, it's not linear. Studies show like 1,000 milligrams got you 10 pounds, let's say. 2,000 milligrams will get you 20. It'll maybe get you 15. So it's not linear. A good dosage for everybody to stick around, a rough ballpark, 700 milligrams to 1,500 milligrams. That's where things really start to level off, and I wouldn't run, you know, you're getting on the lower side of a good cycle. So, 900 to 1,200 milligrams is a really good for total anabolics. A really good dosage, I feel, for most people. Do you believe in intra-workout nutrition? For example, just simple carbs during the workout? Not really, I believe, because like gastric emptying alone takes 1.5 hours, I believe it was. So your pre-workout meal is actually going to be your intra-workout meal. Ooh, that's just gastric emptying alone, you know what I mean? Certain nutrients still need to be broken down by enzymes in the small intestine. So I believe in a really great pre-workout meal. I feel most guys overcomplicate it and they're just not eating enough, their meals during the day. Because, your pre-workout meal is essentially your post-workout meal. And that's what some studies have shown matters the most. So I believe in a really good pre-workout meal. And a really good morning meals, too, to, maximally make sure your glycogen and everything is up there. How is libido on Deca only compared to test? It depends on the individuals. Some will say it's equal. Some will say it's neutral. Very rarely, some will say it's a little bit less, and that's usually people who aren't converting to enough estrogen on Deca only. And some people say it's immensely more. And that's where you usually find the guys who convert too much estrogen on tests, and then creating too much prolactin usually too, is when tests will destroy it for those guys, and then they go to Deca only, and then they're feel amazing and great in every regards. So Deca will shut me down after a 6 weeks 900 milligram cycle. I should just stop, no PCT. So it depends. This is what I do. If you have a plan in your head, you want to gain 50 pounds and you want to do multiple cycles, you won't be happy after one. You do 6 weeks, come off for 4 to 6 weeks, depending on your Easter, and then you jump back on. And then, Deca was shown to keep nitrogen retention high even 30 days after the last shot. So generally, some guys cruise in between. Sometimes I just have them come off. It depends. And then you start the next cycle, and you maybe do it again. And then after so many cycles, is usually when I suggest, make sure you have a PCT then. So some guys, that should just BCT in between. Ever heard? But isn't all Debo gains lost in the end, and it adds more water and bloat? Deca, Debo, or Deca only? Debo's more androgenic. You're going to gain way more strength, and it's more anabolic on paper. And most will agree, in the real world, it is more anabolic. Debo, like tests, like I mentioned earlier, guys go on tests, they gain 20 pounds, they lose almost all of it when they come off, and then they feel like, they worry they lost their gains. No, they just lost their water weight. Debo is a bit more water. It's less than tests. Many people don't realize that when they run Debo on Deca, they actually look immensely lean and tight, just fuller. You're going to lose some gains, yes, but you're not going to lose them all at all. Debo is a very powerful drug. It's a big misconception. That's why many pro bodybuilders did Debo only cycles, and many will admit this in the past. It's a very great drug, and some of my guys do too, and I've done it too, and it's a very great drug. It's not all water. Your advice: 6 weeks on and 4 off, and 6 on. Then I can just repeat the process, or should I come off? That's up to you and how you feel. As you know, steroids, like I mentioned in animal studies, shown that it could cause an adrenal insufficiency. A lot of men on long-term TRT seem to notice that too. So go by how you feel. If you really feel run down, you might want to do a PCT. Do as many, back-to-backs as you want. That's totally up to you. You should go by how you feel there and what you feel safe with doing with your body. Not a steroid bodybuilding related question. And your hair goes gray because of some nutrient deficiency, example copper. Once you balance, will the hairs that went gray go back to their natural color, or do you just won't grow any new gray hairs? So obviously how the hair is growing out of your root, the hair that's growing in will start being black again, or whatever color. So yeah, it'll start to turn back to your previous color, and this is documented in countless studies and just anecdotal reports online. Dealing with a guy with it right now, a study of low ferritin, them adding a specific iron supplement, their hair went back to black. See animal studies as well. So tyrosine is another big one. When it's lacking, it'll your hair can go gray. Tyrosine, calcium, ferritin, folate, a few of them are related to graying hair. Good Debo dose. Never suggest under 20. I mean, it can be used lower and see great results, absolutely. But again, if you're shutting yourself down and you want optimal results, I feel like 20 is the lowest, 50 milligram is a medium high, and upwards of 100 milligrams. And you can run a lot more. And I know a lot of people like to, we don't know the liver effects, but there's a 6-week study on 100 milligrams a day, no liver toxicity for 6 weeks. And then all the old bodybuilders of the past, and then the old doctors like Dr. Kerr talking about bodybuilders running 7 bottles of D-bol a day, and all the old pros admitting it. And the typical orals are really a lot safer than people think. The new designer ones, those are very, they have shown like liver failure and stuff, but D-bol has been abused the hell out of it. And I'm not suggesting the higher doses, just my opinion. 20 milligrams low, 30 to 50 is a medium, and 100 is a more higher. Would you need an AI with 50 milligrams a day? So many people don't know this, but D-bol actually does make less estrogen in studies compared to testosterone. Majority of my guys that would get gyno off even 100 milligrams of test. I've ran 100 milligrams of D-bol and no gyno. And a lot of that is likely due to your ratio of androgens to estrogen. What's the rationale science behind 6 on 4 off? I'm releasing an article on that soon, and it's against a big myth basically about androgen receptors. Most steroids upregulate androgen receptors. So see, it's not a sensitivity issue. Yet they're only looking at half the picture and looking at studies that show the initial period of steroid use. Studies of longer term actually show they go back down to baseline. So, you know, that is just, it's funny, it's been on the internet for years, people saying, oh, they upregulate receptors. It's like, nope, you just never looked thoroughly into studies. And I feel like that's where I come in on a lot of areas. You know what I mean? I see a study and I'll be like, okay, that's neat, but let's look even further. What would you suggest for someone whose libido has gone down over the years, cycled off for over 2 years, still has never been the same? Do you have a protocol for that? Yeah, tricky. That's way too immense talk here. It's not just sex hormone related, it is multiple sex hormones are related. Like men on TRT, when libido was low, they added progesterone and it had an increase. Too low prolactin has actually been linked to it as well, and many neurotransmitters are linked to it. Everybody knows dopamine. Then there's acetylcholine. It's very big top. You have to figure out why that's happening for you individually versus just say take these 20 different items and hopefully you hit it. Okay. Okay. Alright guys, it's almost 4 a.m. here. I think I'm going to call the broadcast for the night. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these probably. I try and post up times when I'm going to do them ahead of time, not like this, spur of the moment at 4 a.m. Yeah, so I'll try and post a public post on the page about when I'm going to be doing them. So yeah, and then leave any on my wall or in here any you know, suggestions, things you guys want to hear, or you know, things, just anything in general. Alright guys, I'm going to call this for now and possibly try and get a little bit of sleep, and then like I said, I'll make a post soon and then hopefully do one. What's the lowest dose of NPP you can get away with to replace testosterone sex drive with a secondary anabolic run higher? I'm not exactly sure what you mean with a secondary anabolic run higher. You know, again, there's studies on 100 milligrams NPP and, you know, it being fine. So, you know, it really depends on what you mean. When you run a base, you need a base that gives you adequate androgenic activity and estrogenic activity at whatever dose that is prior. NPP Deca, the absolute lowest for most would be 200 milligrams, and you know, you should be fine, everything good. But you could run less and have another compound, yes. It had to create more estrogen or add estrogen itself, and it would probably want to be a little bit more androgenic. What about, you cannot run Winstrol only, you can only run EQ only, Deca only, Trestolone Ment only, and D-bol only. The reason is you need estrogen. None of those other drugs convert to estrogen. You don't have estrogen, you become insulin resistant. Your fat loss is impaired, your heart health goes to crap, your bone health goes to crap. You need estrogen, and you can only run those specific ones as your base. The one thing he says is that libido's never been the same after 1 gram of Deca solo. This happens a lot. This isn't, you know, due to the Deca or whatever. You search forum post guys that have ran, you know, cycles where they're just test, you know, just any androgen period, and this seems to happen to a lot of guys over time. No matter what they run, it's just like a time thing. like I was saying, a few questions you want to look into. One, did you recover your hormones? And you know, whether you ran a PCT and checked if your hormones were recovered, and also your neurotransmitter. So, you know, the too bold of a question. It does happen a lot to guys, and it's not a Deca solo thing. It's, you know what I mean? I see it happen a lot with Trent. It seems to be the stronger androgen. Same with Trestolone. But even guys who just ran massive doses of tests, they seem to have that issue. You know, a few years after cycling, it's like, oh, things aren't working. That's good. So is that oral ment or just injectable? Both. Either ment doesn't matter. Be careful on ment though. You know, it does have some nasty side effects. I'm just gonna leave that there. All right, guys. Like I said, almost 4 a.m. I'm going to call it now before I get lost into any more questions. So look for my post on my public page here for the next live. Yeah. All right. Peace out, guys.